Okay, so welcome to this evening of poetry, wherever you are in the world on this day in the middle of April, which out my window doesn't exactly look like the cruelest month. Spring is here in Scotland. The hills are yellow with gorse and broom, and a host of golden daffodils are well up in gardens and in the ditches along the roads. The lambs are in the fields, making all the vales rejoice. You can feel the sun sinking into your bones when you're outside, heating your blood. Soon, summer is ecumen. How's that for medieval English? Pretty good, eh? Maybe I shouldn't have dropped that course. So it's been a real long, hard winter here in Scotland. I'm not sure how it felt for you, the winter. So I think it's a really nice evening for poetry, although any evening is a nice evening for poetry. I hope it's a pleasant evening where you are and that you can sit back and relax, maybe with a cup of tea or coffee, and enjoy an evening of inspiration in virtual but real community. I've got a cuppa here. I've got my William Blake Tiger cup. And I got my poetry hat on, which also covers a bald spot. So I'm Neil Painter, and I'm an editor with Wild Goose Publications. And I work with Sandra Kramer, who's the publishing manager, who does many, many different things, all of them well. And Jane Dorick Riley, who organized this evening. Thanks very much, Jane. And who does other creative things for Wild Goose. And also work with Iona Community, who's the admin person and the Zoom master tonight. Thanks very much, Iona. So we're recording this for the Iona Community YouTube channel. And Iona, do you want to tell folk about the ins and outs of that? You're good at that. That would be much appreciated. Thanks very much.
Yep, just to say, if you aren't one of our wonderful poets this evening, if you could generally stay on mute just to avoid having background noise. And if you do want to ask any questions at the end and you speak, just know that your video and voice may end up on the Iona Community YouTube channel. If you do want to ask questions or speak, but you really do not want to appear, just let me know either in the chat or by email afterwards. That would be wonderful. I'll hand back to Neil.
Thanks, that's great, Iona. So tonight we have reading Bonnie Thurston, Kenneth Stephen, Martin Wroe, Joy Mead, and Jan Sutch Pickard. Wild Goose publishes quite a bit of poetry, so we wanted to highlight and celebrate that by inviting some Wild Goose poets to read their work. Iona is an island of inspiration that has inspired many poets, of course, from St. Columba to Wordsworth to George MacLeod to Kate McElhaga, Kathy Galloway, Ruth Burgess, and many other Iona Community folk. It's actually one of the things that first attracted me to the Iona Community back in 1997, way back in 1997, when I first came as a volunteer. It's poetry, which I felt gave thanks for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. For me, and I think for many others, the poetry, the prayers, and the music of the Iona Community was a way in. And somewhere I wrote this. When I first came to Iona as a volunteer, I didn't know what to expect. I went into the Abbey for worship and heard someone reading a prayer by Kate McElhaga. I couldn't believe I was hearing such beautiful, relevant, poetic words in a church. Words that addressed peace and justice issues and that touched the heart and soul. Whenever I went to church back home, there was little or nothing in the services about the wonder and joy of life, or just the basic mystery of being alive under the great changing sky upon the good, rich earth. The language was archaic and the rhythm stiff and dreary. There was a dusty, fusty, sometimes sterile smell coming from something, a dead religion maybe, being covered up. What's the point of going to church if you don't find nourishment? Who would give a stone to a child who asks for bread? I was so hungry for mystery, wonder, community, challenge, life when I came to Iona. I was so hungry for food that would strengthen and inspire me to reach out and love. And that's what I found in the community and worship there. Bread for body, mind, and soul, life in all its fullness. So let's get to the poets. Bonnie, you're first up, and I'll give you a wee intro first. Bonnie is a native of West Virginia. She lives quietly near Wheeling. She volunteers in the food pantry, I think, having resigned a professorship in the New Testament at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. She's done postdoctoral work in the New Testament at Harvard Divinity School and other places as well. She's written or edited 23 theological books and 7 collections of poetry, including From Darkness to Eastering, which is published by Wild Goose. She's an award-winning poet, having won a number of competitions. Hi, Bonnie. West Virginia always reminds me of the John Denver poem, Country Roads. Do you have a favorite poet? Maybe not John Denver, but maybe John Denver. He was good. Maybe another. And why is that person your favorite poet? Hard to pick one poet probably, but who comes to mind?
Actually, I don't have a favorite poet.
Oh, okay.
Very hard for me to name. I could name poets that have influenced me over the years, and I can introduce you to Jane Kenyon if you don't know.
Oh, I know her. I remember her. You know, having lived in Canada, I remember her poems. Yeah.
Right, and a new biography of her by Dana Green is just coming out this year. Yeah. So that's a good word.
Okay. Yeah, I remember her poems from anthologies. Yeah, she's great. Okay, thanks. Take it away.
All right, I'll take it away. Because we're in the Easter season, I'll borrow a made-up verb from Gerard Manley Hopkins. These are poems about Eastering, more or less. And so before I begin with that, I want to say a word of thanks to Ruth Burgess, who's included some of my work in her seasonal collections. And I've been very grateful to be in that. And I'm certainly honored to read with the other poets that are reading this evening, whom I'm seeing for the first time. I've read their work forever. It's nice to put a face with it. The first poem is called Fiat, and it has to do with carrying a cross. So we'll do a cross and then we'll do Easter. This is called Fiat. There comes from nowhere, with no connection to the present moment or circumstance, a wave of sadness, abrupt and acute as a paper cut, making the eyes tear, the breath tense, as if a telegram brought some terrible news or a phone call announced a tragedy. This momentary mourning is unmoored, unrelated to personal circumstance, one's pain, perplexity, slings and arrows. It's life's great free-floating sorrow, the desperate keening of a broken world, its unborn dying, its causeless martyrs, all that suffers alone and unlamented. Perhaps aspiring to soothe the universe, one can accept it simply, live it secretly, this mysterious vocation to help God bear unimaginable burdens. Unlike conscripted Simon of Cyrene, one can voluntarily carry this concealed cross and trembling trudge toward resurrection. The second poem is called Holy Saturday. It's my favorite day of the liturgical year. All the exciting drama is over and we don't know what's coming, and so we just have to wait. This poem is called Holy Saturday. After the night of tears, the noon of darkness, a whole day's space. The seventh day, the day God rested from making and being unmade. Christ has died. Life is hidden in God's obscurity. Adam lay bounden with fruitless Eve. and nobody can be sure what will happen next. I love this day of silent waiting when fasting is over and feasting not yet begun, when pain is past but flesh not quickened. This is where we live, this human space waiting before the cave in the tarnished garden where it all began and ended to begin anew, we hope, forever. And this was pretty straightforward. It's called The Stone. We're sort of making our way quickly through Easter. Remember the myrrh bearers, the women carrying the spices to the tomb, the stone. The myrrh bearers came with what fear and trembling, trudging alone in darkness, worrying about the stone. Everybody worries about the stone, that great impediment between us and what we seek, the great burden we carry like Sisyphus, laboring up and down the hill. The sun rose, the women looked up. The stone, which was very large, had been removed. No wonder they ran to tell Cephas. Somebody should tell Sisyphus, put it down, man, and dance on it. We, in our part of West Virginia, were settled by the Scots-Irish, mostly Presbyterians, and they still planted the dead with their feet toward the east so that when the general resurrection came, everybody would sit up together and look at the face of Christ. This poem is called General Resurrection. Ancient church cemeteries planted their people feet toward the east, toward the rising sun, toward Christ's return, ready to see first his luminous face, ready to leap into his fiery embrace. From friendly ground, long lovingly tended, I imagine them all rising as one, unidirectional, undivided in intent, a great multitude marching together toward the unimaginable. Well, it's finally getting to be spring here in the northern part of West Virginia where I live. Still freezing at night. It was 34 Fahrenheit when I got up this morning, but things are beginning to bloom. So I'll close with a little snapshot with a poem called Viriditas, which you probably know comes from Hildegard of Bingen. So I've stolen her word for my poem. Long before it is visible, one hears the greening in spring birdsong. The drilling woodpecker smells it in thaw-perfumed, softening wind, ripe with luscious living loam. Snowdrops lead crocuses which slowly emerge like vegetable gemstones, and hellebore droops its dangerous purple beauty. Late March snow doesn't long delay its dawning. On a brittle branch, the palest green bud teases the very tip of a frozen life, which might be yours. Thank you. One word of shameless commerce. Neil said we might mention our most recent work. I've just written a modern verse life of Saint Mary of Egypt. She's a 4th century saint. Not too many know about her. There were scads of medieval lives of hers in Latin and early French and German and Spanish. And anyway, I think she's a wild woman, and I thought she needed a new modern verse life. So there is a new verse life called St. Mary of Egypt, A Modern Life and Interpretation, Liturgical Press. So if you want to meet quite a remarkable early woman Christian, I recommend that you look up Mary of Egypt.
Great. Thanks, Bonnie.
Shameless commerce.
That was okay. I was gonna do the shameless commerce too, and say that your book on Wild Goose from Darkness to Eastering is available at www.ionabooks.com. So
it also has a fabulous cover. I don't know who designed the cover, but it couldn't be more perfect for what the book is about.
Sandra or Jane, probably. I think Sandra, that one. I'm not sure. Do you have a daily discipline? Is part of your daily discipline writing? How does that work for you, Bonnie?
Well, no, actually, I get up and pray for the first hour of the morning.
Right.
And I'm an Anglican, oh dear. And I use the Book of Common Prayer and whatever the lectionary texts are from the day for the day. And then I read, but the reading is often poetry. And you probably heard it in the poems, little snippets of scripture or 2 words in somebody else's poem. Sometimes if on a good day, might trigger a poem.
Right. Okay. Will you make it to Iona this year?
Yes, in first week of September.
Good for you. Okay, thank you. It's nice to see your face too, not just emails back and forth. So Kenneth, hi, Kenneth. I'll give you a little bio here, Kenneth. Kenneth Stephen is a full-time Scottish writer and best known as a poet. He's had many collections of work published over the years. His volume of selected poems, Iona, appeared a couple years back from Paraclete Press in the States. He and his wife, Christina, lead Celtic Christian retreats on Iona each October, and his half-sister, Helen Stephen, was justice and peace worker for many years for the Iona community. On Wild Goose Publications, Kenneth's published many books, but on Wild Goose, we published, I think I've got them all, West, A Wee Book of Iona Poems, The Sound of Iona, and The Monk and the Mermaid. I apologize if I've forgotten something. Kenneth, how are things in beautiful Argyll tonight?
They are. I'm looking out of a window as you asked me that, and I cannot see a cloud.
Yeah, it's like that here too. It's unbelievable.
I'm sure it is.
And
It's
I was
perfect.
I was in Dumfries and Galloway on the weekend, and I had a day, and I felt like I was getting a sunburn. It was great after that winter.
I know.
Okay, I'll hand things over to you, Kenneth. Thanks very much.
Well, I'm remembering your first question actually to Bonnie about a favorite poet, and
Okay.
if you don't mind, I won't wax too lyrical about that, but the poet that springs to mind, and that seems very appropriate in the wake of listening to these beautiful poems from Bonnie, is Wallace Stevens, the wonderful, there's no adjective for him.
Wonderful.
The great Wallace Stevens, just wonderful. I love his work dearly, among many others, but that's the name that came to mind. I want to read a few poems from West, which Neil has mentioned, and I'm going to start by reading. Neil mentioned my half-sister Helen, whom I thought of very much as my full sister. And this is the first poem to it. The volume West was dedicated to her memory, and this is my poem that I wrote right after her funeral and before her memorial service in Glasgow. She was Scotland to me. Bedtime stories that woke me to the history of Wallace and Bruce would have had me up in a saddle, galloping back in time for the bits of the border we'd lost. She lived down endless long windings of bumps in cottages with attics and owls, the hope of conquerors in the morning. She drove me one August night when the skies were orange and bruised, till the storm was flickering booms and we came home in silvering rain. She was drives at high speed down roads that should have closed long ago, in cars that were held together by the hope of a better tomorrow. She could conjure a whole ceilidh out of a candle and an old bothy. She was songs and tin whistles in the middle of the worst of blizzards. She was a beach where you could always swim, and a place you'd not known before. She was a fire that would set you alight, an adventure that was yet to be planned. I'm working a lot on sonnets at the moment. So I think that for tonight's reading, which I'm so glad is happening, I was drawn to one of the two sonnets that's published in the West collection. This I wrote in the midst of my despair, a few days, a few nights after Donald Trump was elected. And I think it's beyond that, it speaks for itself, despite the dark. Sometimes it is not strange to think that God is out behind the darkness of the night, that there is hope, however small and odd the thought might be. Sometimes it is all right, believing that the good will yet win out against the weight of hate, and that the light will shine again when all the voices doubt, and you have fought the dark with all your might. Lift up your hand and see its grace anew, and open wide the window to the dawn to hear the birds that sing the morning in. For this is still 1,000 times more true than fear and lies and giving in to wrong. So keep your faith, believe, begin again. And I want to read one Iona poem. It's, what will I say about it? And to those of you listening, perhaps I will be teaching you a Gaelic word, I don't know, the word macha, which is the wonderful sweet grass that is so loved by the sheep, will be being loved by the lambs at this moment, as we are all gathered here around the imagined fire to listen to poems tonight. Macha is that wonderful, wonderful, rich, sweet grass. So that's the only word I need to tell you. But it's thinking about the west of the island. It's thinking about arriving and going on that crossing of road which bisects the island from east, from its landing point to west, and to the opening out of everything. Enough said. Salt. When you have forgotten what it means to have the wind hurrying your window all night long, it's time to find the island. There is a gate beyond, a track that's made of sand winding down the Macha. You will hear the sea long before you're there, or the shoulders of the island have opened so that all the horses of the west are galloping the beach again and now again. And if you should open to and let in light, it is because the breakages within you are so many. And the salt, no matter how it hurts, will heal. I'll read this. I hadn't planned to, but I am reading it. It's from close to where my wife Christina and I live, here in the west of Argyll, mainland Argyll. Well, we think of it really as mainland Argyll. We are on the Isle of Seal, but we are blessed with an island. and we don't have to worry about a ferry that might not work at the moment. Not far down the road is the wonderful, wonderful village and area of Kilmartin, with all its marvellous prehistoric stones. It's an area I absolutely love. And of course, it's the cradle of Scotland, where the Celts first arrived from Ireland. Kilmartin. A day of blue wind, the 1st of September, and we drove by headlands and long shores as light blew in on the land. Here, where they first landed in boats carved from Ireland, they came with bare hands, made clearings out of the woods. Men who had fashioned the skill to circle great ledges of stone, so when moonlight came tilting just sometimes, it poured into perfect place. Looking back on their lives after all, down the long glens of time, we see them through mist and perceive them as minds that had not grown up. But they steered by night, silent, learned creeks and the deepest lochs, traded with far away, learned the language to buy and sell all they needed. They whispered flint, the finest knives, tipped for deer and the fear of wolves. Map gazers, stargazers, settlers, their stories left in the stone. And one poem to finish from the West collection, a tiny little haiku-esque poem entitled Birthing. We are brought out of love into a world sore to the touch. It hurts, but it is worth it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you. Was there, what inspired you to start writing, Kenneth? Was there ever a moment, like way back when you realized you wanted, when you needed to write? How much of that feeling was connected to, or was it connected to the inspiration or power of Iona?
It was very connected. Well, I'll start with that bit. It was certainly connected to Iona. The two things, I feel that that frail umbilical of faith and Iona and the creative umbilical, somehow they all unite in a very deep place. That's all I can say. And I was taken to Iona by my parents from babyhood. I evidently learned to walk on Iona, and obviously that's been with me ever since in different guises, different incarnations. But all of those things are inextricably linked, is the answer.
Oh, great, it's a great answer. Will you be doing your retreat on Iona this year, your poetry retreat, if that's what it's?
It's actually, yes, it's actually, what, just to say in a nutshell, it's my retreat with my wife, Christina. So it's a Celtic Christian retreat. I no longer do formal writing ones on the island, but very much Celtic Christian ones. And that will be in October, yes.
At the Argyle.
At the Argyle Hotel, yeah.
Thanks, Kenneth. There's lots of good things on your website, Kenneth's website too. People want to check that out. What's the website address, Kenneth? Do you know it offhand?
It's just all the w's.kennethstephen.co.uk.
Okay, easy. Okay, so here's the part of the evening where you can win a free book. There's a quiz question. So if you've been very perspicacious, you'll realize that I have been very artfully inserting lines of poetry into the Zoom meeting this evening. Now, earlier I quoted the line, everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes, which is actually a good mantra. So if you can tell me the poet who wrote that, you can win a free book. And I'm going to take 2 winners because some people are really quick on the emails. So if you email me the correct answer at Neil, N-E-I-L, at ionabooks.com, that's N-E-I-L at ionabooks.com, you can have a free book from, you know, any of the authors here. And I'll take 2 winners. So the first 2 callers, and I'll check in the morning. I won't do that this evening, tonight, and good luck. So it's everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. Give me the poet who wrote that, and you can have a free book, and that'll make me really happy. Martin, how are you this evening? I'm going to do a little intro about you first. Martin Wroe lives with Meg, a painter in North London. He was at one time on the staff of the Independent and the Observer, and he's a former chair of the Greenbelt Arts Festival. He's an associate member of the Iona Community and a regular contributor to BBC4's Thought for the Day. And he recently published Julian of Norwich's Teabag, Prayers and Poems from Morning to Night on Wild Goose. And I think that should win some kind of award for a title. Recently, Bono, the singer of U2, in the New York Times mentioned that he was reading Martin's book. There we go, Martin, for an intro. And I'll just hand it over to you. Thanks very much.
I'll mention someone else's book to start with. It's a first novel by a Scottish writer called Victoria Mackenzie. And it's also about Julian of Norwich. It's got a more medieval title, For Thy Great Pain, Have Mercy on My Little Pain. And in reading it a few weeks ago, I discovered that the poem I'm going to read first, which I wrote 2 years ago, is very timely, because in 2 weeks' time, it's the 650th anniversary of Julian of Norwich's showings, which were these revelations she received as a woman of 30 in Norwich all those years ago. So in her first showing, she had a kind of proto-eco vision with a hazelnut in her hand when she realized this hazelnut was everything. And I had a similar ecstatic experience when I was leaning over our compost bin. So that's what sparked this first poem, which I'll read to you, which is the title poem of this book. It is all that is made. That's Julian in Norwich, tripping on a hazelnut in her 14th century grip. My trip is this tea bag, giving up its love, this perforated planet in my steaming mug. Onward flight in the dark of compost bin, with potato peel, onion and banana skin. From Sri Lanka or Kenya, this leafy supernova. Here in my kitchen, this miraculous stopover. The quiet hummus of mineralization, organic breakdown, mostly just waiting. How earth flavors and fires this life every day. I get it, Julian, this tea bag, how it's all that is made. So that's the first one, the title of this little book. Thank you, Neil, for asking me to put it together. The second one I'd like to do, you know, occasionally a poet will just discover a poem. It almost writes itself. So this is one, I think, basically wrote itself one morning a long time ago when my eldest son was, he must have been about 16. So this is called Front Door. Here we go. Front door. It's 7:49 a.m. You've just gone out the front door. You pulled it hard to catch the lock. It didn't catch, so I walked towards it to give it a push. As I reached out to push, you reached back to give it a pull. I saw you through the stained glass, reaching back even as you were leaving. You pulled it shut before I got there. I smiled. You were gone. I'll always be reaching for the door that you've gone through. I know you have to leave, but I'll always be hoping you might return. I'll always be looking for you as the years stain and blur. One day you won't stop and turn. You won't reach back. But I'll always be at the door just in case. It's 7:59. Thank you. So this is a slightly longer one. This is one that emerged in the pandemic. It's in England, at least, all the churches were shut. And because I've got a key to our local parish church, I went in one day and I wanted to imagine what it would be like to be church. So this poem is called Talking Church. All quiet, I unlocked your door, discreetly broke in, not to disturb you, interfere with that frequency I so rarely tune to you. I sat down by the font, held a second in my palm, dialed to silence, awaited communication, some kind of guidance. The font was tight-lipped. The rude screen blanked me. I tried not to take it personally. The organ, holding her breath, was not coming up for air. I looked for my words to speak to the unspoken. Locked down in quiet time, this great crowd of witness. What are you thinking? I whispered on the chancel, where the candles played dead, keeping their distance. Mary winked from the window with a stained glass eye, splintering the sun from 93 million miles. Do you miss us? I asked. Do you want us back? An angel arched an eyebrow, advised I stop talking, said silence holds more than quiet, that the absence of all souls doesn't mean they're not here. I lay down in the nave, gazed up through the dust motes, at the pillars, the arches, the old wooden roof, heard a chorus of voices singing someone's death, witnessed a happy couple plighting their troth, saw heads being bowed, knees being bent, forgiveness and mercy and centuries of weeping, and someone from the future came to offer me the peace. She said, this house is open even when it's closed. Prayers pray themselves. That's how everything goes. Right, I'm going to try, someone famously said that poems are never finished, they're only ever abandoned. So let me try a couple of new ones on you. This first one is called Lowering, and it's a play on the idea of raising. We talk about raising children, raising people. I thought about lowering. Lowering should be given the same respect as raising. To lower a person well, in the way we would wish to be lowered, to lower them with love and respect, to let them down kindly, firmly maybe, safely always, improvising perhaps, but trustworthy, learning when to hold them, when to release them, to let the cords loosen in your grip, to let the body lie there in the good earth, to stand quietly in the universe, to send them on their way, to go on yours. Right, I'll just read one more, which has also been abandoned, and maybe it's finished, I don't know. Where is it? Oh yeah, that's right, I just remember what it's called. Oh yeah, here we go. Right, this is what happens when you get to a certain age. This one in the morning and this one at night. And each time the thought, have I got this right? Another, hard to swallow, keeps my joints in motion. This drink I make sorts of digestion. The latest novel exercise, a trip to the gym, need to walk a bit faster, be more disciplined. A rumble and a grumble I want to dismiss. They've got a clever camera. Can you pee in this? The who I am is wearing out. The what I am is breaking. And now they need to take this out. And this will need replacing. And then the seismic moment out of the blue. I've had a good run, but what can you do? It seems I've had an acronym, a string of long words. I'm put on a pathway, no way back to where you were. You've had a one-off episode, which wants to be a series. So 3 times a day, take 2 of these. It's management now. Remember this, remember that. As age turns us all into hypochondriacs. Watch your constitution, lose a bit of weight. Hold yourself together with this gaffer tape. the body's conversation in the middle of the night, impolite reminder of the dimming of the light. Then I think of all this with you and being alive and answer the thought, well, at least I got this right. Okay, that's probably enough from me. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Thank you. Joy, hello. I'll give you a little intro. So this is what Ron Ferguson, the writer Ron Ferguson, writes about Joy. Joy Mead is a poet of great sensitivity and subtlety. She is a deeply religious poet without being a religious poet, if you know what I mean. Genuine spirituality is located in the material, in the embodied. That seems to be how God works. Joy Mead's spirituality is grounded in the depths of so-called ordinary life, the extraordinary life. That's why she is one of my favorite poets. And Joy's latest book is Wintersong on Wild Goose Publications, www.ionabooks.com. How are you tonight, Joy?
Oh, quite good, all things considered. Thank you.
Good.
The sun has been shining here too, but it's not as warm here as it is in Scotland. So,
okay. Well, we have to get the warmth sometimes. Yeah. Okay, I'll leave it to you.
right. I had a problem wondering how to select what Neil said, 4 to 7 poems.
Did I say 7 to you? Is that 6?
How many did you really mean? Anyway, I decided that probably the way I would go would be to look for the poems that people have asked me for and have used most. And they're just a selection, and they're mostly poems that look at what poetry is. Take a thing, an ordinary happening, an ordinary person even, and try to show us the depth and of that person. Anyway, I don't say too much about it. I'll read. The first one is called The Candle We Light. I should actually say that this was, I thought of this because we light candles on all sorts of occasions, and I don't think we altogether know why we do it, but it's another example of something deep and meaningful for which we have no language. The candle we light is more than itself. It's a flame of many memories, a lifetime of relationship, lover, partner, husband, wife, brother, sister, parent, child. It's a fragile flicker of chance that makes encounters into friendships. It's a touch of a lover, a smile of a neighbour, a child who puts a hand in mine, silently telling me there is tomorrow and all will be well. It's a drench of fresh rain, a garden of sunflowers, impish daisies that come from nowhere, a good meal, a cat to stroke, a cup of clear water, the last rays of the setting sun. When cure is impossible, it's healing and peace. It's closeness in loneliness, comfort in mourning, love to share. It's a farewell to the one who has died and a yes of breath to the living. It's the ripeness and wholeness of all beginnings and endings. We light the candle to let go shattered dreams and all that might have been, into the dark space, into the greater hope. This moment of shining is a tiny bit of the darkness. In a tiny bit of the darkness is hope, prayer, blessing. It will burn itself out, but never die. I do not know what resurrection is, but I believe it comes quietly in moments of light, where love is strong to bear regrets and banish fears. And for now, that is enough. And following on the idea of looking at small things, this is a poem about some scissors that were my mother's. My mother started work at the age 13 in a shoe factory in Norwich, and the girls had to provide their own scissors. And I used these scissors all through my childhood, and only found out just before my mother died that these were the only things she had left from her childhood and her first days at work. Scissors, cold to my touch, the metal almost black and rusted in places. The centre bolt worn smooth. They carry their age with style. There's a maker's mark I can't quite read, but I can see Norwich, where the story began, around 1924, when my mother, at just 14, began work in a shoe factory. They helped her cut free from the bonds of service, stayed with her into adult life, possibly the only thing she owned in her childhood, and a reminder of the ever-present possibility of poverty. They were used all the years of my childhood, their place never taken by a new pair, and they held on to their secret until just before she died. Then they came to me with their enduring story of a changing world and a cutting-edge dream. And I'll move on now to happenings rather than things. Walking our story. On footpaths, green lanes and hollow ways, harrowed paths, sunken roads, drove roads to market, ways to church, pilgrim paths, the way to the sea, connecting thread, thought to poetry, beaten track. Our paths, settled ways, without impulse or suddenness, are mysterious and humbling. They tell of a tendency, of desire, of loving, a life of journeys, an archive of paths, trodden by innumerable feet, the feeling intelligence, the way to the undiscovered, the way home. I'll follow that continuation of the way home, really. This one is called The Road Home. The road home seems shorter now, steeper, with more stones, darker sometimes, yet the light at the end is often very close. Noisier in places, but mostly silent. Still the search. Now no greater meaning than beauty, exquisite moments in unexpected places. To be old is to see clearer the loveliness of things. The end is around a bend I can't yet see, but it's there, waiting for me and you to be ready. One day I'll turn that bend alone, and I hope content. Now a complete change. This poem was inspired by the Lampedes of Greek mythology and the Match Girls strike of 1888. The Spark Catchers, a poem by Lem Sissay, which first appeared in Gold from the Stone, and a musical composition by Hannah Kendall with the same title, are all part of the inspiration. Catch a spark. Catch a spark as the Match Girls did in long ago London, saving themselves, holding the light. Catch a spark as the poet did, holding the words to shape the story to light the flow. Catch a spark as the composer did, with soul and sound, a work beyond words to include us all. Catch a spark in homes and hovels, refugees and refugee camps, refuges and refugee camps, prisons and palaces. Listen for voices and violins. Let the spirit go free, the soul rejoice in humanity and hope. Catch a spark of human creativity, the inclusive language of community, the irrepressible rhythm of the earth, the music of consciousness to awaken and heal us all. Catch a spark, see it, hear it, hold it until. Another very ordinary things, very ordinary happiness. Hanging out the words. A memory of Mondays, Mum stirring up cleanliness with a bleached stick, creating a rhythm of hiss and flap and slop, steam and sweat and shiny faces, water and soap rainbows. Then the lines, patterns of sleeves and legs, shorts and little dresses, matching pants and lace-edged vests, shirts, sheets and socks, petticoats and pillowcases, jumpers and skirts. They are the bunting of the days of our working and playing, the flags of our loyalty and loving, the procession of our lives hanging out to dry. They make a story that won't be untold when someone dies. The wearer's smell doesn't wash out. Today my washing won't be dry by dusk. The days are golden, but getting shorter and slower. I am reading between the lines of clothes. The sun is losing power. I'm beginning to feel cold. And I'll finish with a poem I wrote for my grandson, one of my grandsons. It's called Trusting Life. To my newborn grandson, I want to say that being human is as much about poetry as faith, as much about feet as soul. The moments when I see into the heart of things have little to do with beliefs or creeds, churches, altars or black-robed priests, and everything to do with the story I tell about the surprises of ordinary days. Everything to do with the brush of daisy petals against my bare feet and the feel of life in the bread as it rises in my hands. Everything to do with the surprise of love in newborn eyes staring back at me from the depths of a self you will not find, but create as you live, remembering not the moment of your birth, but the wonder of your life. Thank you. I think I'll stop there.
Thanks very much, Joy. Thanks for reading some of your greatest hits. As Ron says, many of your poems you transfigure the everyday. Just wondering, how do you personally stay open to the moment, to the ordinary miracle of now? Is that about prayer? Is that a discipline for you? Anything to say about that?
It's not a recognized disciplinary thing. I think it's just not losing the sense of wonder. And there is, in spite of everything that's bad in the world, there is a lot to wonder at and to notice small things. And looking for the language that for well, what poetry is really. It never says that we're all searching for what can't be said, really, but it's there in the small things, not in the big events, I think. Yeah. And it's all around. It's not something you go into a quiet room to contemplate and meditate. You know, it's something that happens
Right.
all around you.
We agree. Jan Sutch Pickard. Jan's a little intro for you, Jan. Jan's a poet and storyteller living on the Isle of Mull. She's a member of the Iona Community, former warden of the Abbey on Iona. I think she's a director and volunteer with the Ross of Mull Historical Center. And she was a peace monitor with the Ecumenical Accompany program in Palestine and Israel a couple times. Books on Wild Goose are Out of Iona, Between High and Low Water, A Pocket Full of Crumbs, and there are a bunch of others. Thanks, Jan. Favorite poet?
William Blake.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Because he baffles and challenges me, and I can't work out what he would be like to meet. I have to confess that I have let my battery run down, and I may disappear very suddenly and dramatically. So if you want to hear me read,
go for it.
Go
for it.
Right. And so I'm going to start with an Easter poem from this book, which rather touchingly was described in some Wild Goose promotion as a golden oldie. So as one golden oldie, I shall read from another. And it's an Easter poem. Primroses on the Ushkin Road. Among the dead brambles, on the edge of a ditch, in this bleak wind right now, primroses are blooming. First, there was one alone, a brave promise of new life, a single star, and then 10, a score, more, lifting up their heads, a constellation, a celebration, here and now. Though the wind chills to the bone, between the thorns and the mud, the rumor of resurrection spreads. There's no stopping it now. And flowers blooming, of course, have always been the material of poets. And there's one that takes me a long way away. It takes me to the West Bank when I was an ecumenical accompanier. On one occasion, I was there in the springtime, and I was told by one of our guides, a Jewish woman who was very challenging to her own government, but things delighted as well as challenged her. And she said, look out, look out for the anemones. They are so beautiful, my favorite flowers, and you will see them blooming scarlet on the hillsides. And the next day, a Palestinian friend said, when you go out today, look out for the poppies. They are blooming on the hillsides. They are so beautiful at this time of year after the spring rains. Well, I used my eyes, I looked, and I did see scarlet flowers. I wrote, the flowers of the field, the poppy, the anemone, blooming now after the spring rains. They are different, but both are as red as blood. Scattered across hillsides, where settlers' children play, guarded by teachers carrying guns, fragile among the rubble, where bulldozers groan and fatherless children throw stones. And when the wall is built, they will still be flowering on both sides, fragile as human lives, different, but both red as blood. And I carry that one with me because having encountered all the complexity of life on the West Bank and not fully understanding what is happening in the land that we call holy, I still need to remember those flowers, both as red as blood, and the human beings they stand for. But now I live on the Ross of Mull, and I am going to read a poem which I've not often read, but I want to introduce you to a beautiful secret place, a cave that is right down on the shoreline of the south coast of the Ross, looking across the sea, looking to Colonsay, looking further to Kilmartin. And I decided to read this because of hearing Kenneth read about Kilmartin. And this one is called Sgurr Cave. And just before I begin, there are two books in this, because for Celtic Christians, there was the little book, which was in fact the Bible, so a very big book in many ways, scripture, to which they turned again and again. But there was also the great book of God's creation. And so in this cave, which has carvings in it which date back to the Celtic times, there are crosses with rings on them. There are, but there are also cup and ring marks showing that it was a sacred place for a much longer time. Here is Sgurr Cave. It's a book dropped on the shore long ago, forgotten at the gully's foot, small and easily overlooked, Sgurr. It's a book upturned, cliff-top spine bound with heather roots, stamped with gold stars of Tormentil. It's a space contained, schist slabs peeling apart like pages tell a long story of folk far back, leaving messages, mapping the stars by making cup and ring marks that pock the rock like rainbow drops on the sea. It's where Celtic monks left their graffiti, boundary markers or blessings, crosses scribbled in the margin of history. Fugitives, clans ferrying their dead, or pilgrims seeking a desert in the sea, beached their little boats, safe from the wind's howl and the waves' surge, and clambered up from the shore into the hush of this cave, breathed the musky air. It's where they lived, between its leaves, a marked place in creation's great book, a little missal they held in their hearts. Out there today, in a rising autumn wind, ravens and gulls scatter scraps of paper from the bonfire of time. And you can see that I'm gripping onto my book and I'm gripping onto my computer, and I'm hoping that it will stay with me just long enough for me to read. How much time have I got, Neil?
Go for it.
Go for it. Go for everything. Well, I'm right. I'm going to take you on a terrifying journey, I think, if I can find it. No, I can't find it. That's a pity. I was going to read you a poem about air lifted off Mo, which is, you know, one of those memorable moments, but never mind. There will be another time for that. And you can find it in this book, and a pocket full of crumbs. I also read from Between High and Low Water, and I'm going to come back now to, it's holding things in one hand, it's very rather difficult. So I'm going to read you about, sorry about this. This is an exercise in ineptitude, listening for larks. All right. You can't help hearing the wild geese, their wing beats overhead and their strident calls. You can't help being aware of them day and night, wherever they set web foot, contending over territory, food, relationships, leadership, arguing about who's right, The geese just let you know they're there. Then listen for the larks, their shimmering songs, subtle, sometimes lost in the blustering wind or overlooked by busy minds. But wonder how these humble little birds persist, are constant in their life work of praise. When you set foot on unfamiliar tracks or trudge along well-trodden ways, whether in dancing sunshine or on grey still days, their song, a canon of joy, fills the air. Listen, the larks are still there. I think that might be me, because I think my battery may run out.
Okay, thanks very much, Jen. So any questions from folk out there, or any comments or anything? We'll take a look. Iona and I will take a look through the nice faces and see if you can put up your hand or something like that if you want.
Got Lorna.
To say anything or ask anything, or
I see one from Lorna.
okay, thanks, Iona.
Yeah, Lorna, you're unmuted. You can go.
Okay. Are you hearing me all right?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks to a poetry writing session long ago with Ken Stephen in Dunblane, I discovered that my love of words could be transferred into poetry. And I have written a little book of poems called Hills and Highlands. And there is one about Iona in it. It's quite a, oh dear, I think I'll need to put the light on. It's getting a nice evening. Right, that's a bit better. Be a bit better yet if I could find my glasses. But it's called Eclipse, and it's about a day when there was an eclipse and also a very low tide. And it says, oh, that's not going to work either. Oh dear, this is another exercise in ineptitude. Oh no, my glasses are here. Here we are. That will help. Right. This thing, this eclipse on Iona, it was a day that Joyce Watson was running from looking for it on the sky to running into her television. And I had been staying at the House of Prayer, and everybody was running about daft, really. Ferry. Now just take this up to the light and then I'll definitely be able to see it. Right, sorry about this. Right, this thing, this eclipse on Iona, sun obscured, ferry, low tide, you can't catch me, through Mexican wave running, past Alley, Doreen, Abbey friends, this is an island, Staffa, boat, later, hurtling through mall, helter-skelter, baker's van, flight with dog and driver, Finnefort to Craigure, got the boat, got the train tonight.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you very much. It's very much. Iona's meant a lot to you, I guess. Iona's meant a lot to you, Lorna, I guess.
Indeed. Yeah. I've been going since George MacLeod's day.
Gosh.
I'm 91, nearly 92 now.
Okay.
And the last time I went was in 2021 in May, and I went to the pod.
Oh, I went to the pod too. It was
pod
really good.
Beyond the Abbey.
Yeah, great. Yeah, really nice. Thank you. Thanks for that contribution there. Anyone else? look for hands, looking for hands. Looking at all your faces. Anyone want to ask anything? Don't be shy.
This is so exciting. The the race between the time we've got and the time my battery has got. I am so glad that it didn't start to go when other people were reading. It's great to be in a company of poets like this. It can be a very solitary exercise, but how moving and it is to hear how this world meets us and how we meet the world. Thank you, other poets.
Thanks, Jen. Question. Can poetry change the world? Is poetry about changing people to change the world? Is it about helping us to remember our humanity, which is so important? How does poetry connect with changing the world, or does it? Anyone want to tackle that one? Any of the poets?
Well, poetry is more likely to change the way people think than polemic, I think. And it's actually changing people, changing attitude, changing the way people think apart. But it's a slow process.
Isn't it asking the questions too?
Yeah.
You know, for me as a poet, I absorb, and I was thinking, Jan, of when you were saying when you were in the Holy Land and how you absorbed what people were saying and out came a poem. I sit there and for me, it's very often being challenged and then going away and thinking about it, and suddenly a poem will drop out.
Yes.
With questions or with all sorts of things. So, you know, for me, last time I was on Iona last year, I sat there and I was absolutely astounded. The thing that took my observation, I suppose, was the stones. And so I wrote a poem called The Stones on Iona, thinking about its history and the way it was created. And, you know, it surprised me. And I suppose the question I have of all you poets there is, do you find that when you have written the poem and you read it, you're surprised at what it tells? Yes, because I am.
Sometimes it's very different from what you imagined it would be when you began, when it was started.
Yeah.
But it never quite tells it all.
And I like the idea of poets being surprised by tea bags. How much came out of that tea bag? That's an amazing poem. And so it could be something as solid as a stone, and it could be something as disposable as a tea bag. But God inspires us in a whole variety of ways.
Yeah. Well, if you think of the old early mystics, you know, they came up with all sorts of things. And, you know, I am always surprised when you write how sometimes the mundane, you know, your match girls, you know, all the bits seem to arrive and create a thing of beauty out of it.
Thanks very much, Francesca. For any of the poets out there, any advice for someone who wants to start writing but doesn't know where to begin and how to find time to write? I guess write and read, really. That's what I have problems with sometimes in a busy life. Keep lots of notes, but sometimes don't get back to them.
You have to turn the other stuff off.
What do you mean, Bonnie?
Well, unplug things.
Unplug things.
Unplug the stuff and don't spend too much time in front of the telly.
And that's echoing, that's just to butt in, but only for good reason, Bonnie. I think there that you're echoing the wonderful words of Wendell Berry there, and his about turning off. I can only paraphrase them extremely badly, but the turning off of things.
That's right.
He was saying it to himself, to turn away from the electronics, to turn away from the automatic voices, and to be.
Yeah, and R.S. Thomas gave us the same warning just as technology was beginning to take us all over at the end of R.S. Thomas's life. He was also giving us good warnings, I think. He might be my favorite poet, he or Ruth Bidgood. It's taken me a while to think about that one. I'll double back, but I think Wendell Berry and R.S. Thomas both give us that message. Thanks, Kenneth.
Yes. And to be grateful for what we are given, which may take us completely by surprise. Well, one of the poems that I wrote after being in an ecumenical accompanier was about some of the encounters I'd had, but what sparked it was bread. And it was not just any old bread, it was the bread that I found in my pocket in Crumbs, because somehow I'd received the gift of bread in so many forms. And very often when I was in the middle of a conversation, I couldn't munch it in people's, I put it in my pocket, and all those crumbs mingled in my pocket. When they came out, they were so nourishing to my mind and my memory and my spirit. So that's why I wrote a book called A Pocket Full of Crumbs. It's a terrible habit, and it's life-affirming.
I can make a connection there between the last two conversations, because I once met R.S. Thomas when he was very, very old. I was writing about him for a newspaper, and I think he was, well, I was going to say he was having a bad day. In fact, I think lots of his days were quite bad. But anyway, I was late, and he was cross. Eventually, he calmed down. He let me in, and the photographer, and we got to chatting, and he made me a sandwich. But I have to say, I was a bit suspicious of the sandwich. And in the end, I smuggled it out in the coat pocket of my anorak, and I never actually ate it.
That's wonderful.
You know, what is the glass taste and keep it forever?
There's a poem for you, Martin. If it's already one.
R.S. Thomas sandwich.
Yeah, you should have it a glass case with a label. I once met R.S. Thomas's wife. That was an interesting experience. Very surprising. You know, sort of red high-heeled shoes, fur coat, and brightly made up. Yeah.
If I remember, that's what R.S. Thomas was wearing that day as well. Just kidding.
Do the Wild Goose poets know Ruth Bidgood's work, the Welsh poet? Yeah, she's really worth lifting up.
Jane's nodding yes.
I seem to remember the name rings a bell. I'm sure I've read something by her recently. But
Yeah, she's a poet of Cinnamon Press in Wales and died just last year in her 90s. She swept all the literary prizes in Wales when she was in her 80s, which His hair color cheers me
Where
up
are
a
you?
lot.
I picked it up.
She's a wonderful
Oh,
poet.
yes, that's what it is.
Yes, Mid Wales.
She's
She's a good friend of Rowan's. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
a good.
He's got, yeah, she's in there. That's what I knew. I'd read something. I didn't know her until I read that in here. But I knew. It's, what is it called?
Anyone want to talk about the writing editing process? What to leave in, what to leave out? Does that get easier? How long does it take to write a poem? A day, 3 years? Any
10
comments?
minutes.
And then it's
Lifetime.
lifetime.
65 or 70 years, I think.
Mhm.
Is anything ever finished? I think that's what Martin was talking about. Sometimes I don't think anything's ever finished, but maybe it is. I don't know.
No, there's always, I mean, nothing is ever finished, no, because there's always that unsaid that we haven't got the words for.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to leave now because I'm an hour ahead of everyone here, and I have to go get my kids to bed. So it's 10 here. I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone. I've been wanting to do a poetry evening for years, and I'm so thrilled that we finally got to do one, and I hope it's the first of more. It was really wonderful listening to all of you and to the audience, and like, I wish we had more time. I could listen all night to poetry.
Yes.
So thank you so much. And also everyone, if there are things that you would like us to do, let us know. We can't always do them because we're, you know, only a tiny little team, me, Neil and Sandra and Iona, but we'll certainly try. If there's a night that you want us to put on, or if there's a theme that you want to explore, or things that you want to get deeper into, just send us an email and we'll do what we can, because tonight was really inspiring and lovely. So thank you, everyone.
Great.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay.
Thank you.
I guess that's a good time to
Yes.
end. So thanks to the poets who read. Thanks to everyone who came. Thanks to anyone who buys our books, and to other Wild Goose writers. And take care of yourselves, and see you down the road.